Welcome to the Listening Time Podcast. I'm Connor from polyglossa.com, and you're listening to episode 3 of the Listening Time Podcast. If this is your first time listening, I'd like to welcome you. You are listening to a podcast that's going to help you practice your English listening. So, this podcast is for English learners who can't yet understand native speech when people speak at normal speed or in groups of people. If you can't understand what natives are saying in those situations, but you can already understand a lot of English, this podcast should be perfect for you. I made this podcast, and I'm doing this podcast to give material for those learners who are too advanced for the very beginning level material, the material that gives you dialogues where the people are reading from a script and they're speaking really slowly and they're not using natural language. This podcast is not like that. This podcast is for people that want to listen to authentic English, but English that's a little bit clearer and a little bit slower than real normal English. So, in each podcast, I talk about different topics. I talk about topics that come to my mind throughout the week, or just topics that I feel like talking about, or topics that you suggest. If you, the listener, have topics that you want me to talk about, well, let me know. Leave me a comment and let me know what topics you're interested in hearing about on the Listening Time Podcast. So, also in this podcast, I don't read a script, right? When I make these podcasts, I'm just speaking as the words come to my mind, so it's natural, authentic English, but just a little bit more, I speak a little bit more slowly and a little bit more clearly. And with each podcast episode, you have the transcript available, so you can read to understand the words that you missed when you listened to me the first time. So that transcript should be helpful for all of you. So, in this episode, I'm going to talk about my trip to Peru. So I took a trip to Peru about 2.5 years ago, and I was thinking about it recently, and I thought it would be a good topic to talk about for the podcast. So, we're going to talk about that today. Also, remember to check out our listening practice seminars. They're only $1. So, if you want to train your listening more, you can go to polyglossa.com and sign up for the $1 listening practice seminars there. Okay, let's get started. Are your ears ready? You know what time it is. It's listening time. All right, so let's get started. First of all, I want to mention that this podcast episode will not be very informative. I'm not going to teach you about Peru because honestly, I don't know that much about the country. But I'm going to tell you about my experience there. I'll just tell you a little bit about my trip and the things I saw, the places I went to, etc. It'll be an interesting topic for you to listen to, as you practice your comprehension skills. So, first of all, I flew from Guadalajara, Mexico to Mexico City. This was my first leg of the trip. I didn't fly directly to Peru because I don't think there are any direct flights from Guadalajara to Peru. There might be, but I don't think so. I don't think I've seen any. And so first I went to Mexico City, and I actually spent 2 nights there. So before my main part of the trip to Peru, I went to Mexico City first so I could fly from there. And I wanted to take advantage of the time that I was going to spend in Mexico City. So instead of just having a short layover there, I decided to rent an Airbnb and stay for 2 nights there. So I had a good time in Mexico City by myself. Then, after that, I flew from Mexico City to Lima, Peru. And I didn't fly alone because my friend actually went with me on the trip. I guess I should tell you about him now. He's the one who actually paid for my trip to go to Peru. He really wanted to go, and he wanted to take someone with him who spoke Spanish, because at that time he didn't speak any Spanish, and so he wanted to make the trip a little bit easier for him. And so he knew I spoke Spanish, and so he invited me, and he said, okay, I'll pay for your tickets if you go with me and take that trip with me. So I said, of course, I'm going to do that. So I took him up on his offer, and he paid for my tickets, and I went with him. So we flew together from Mexico City. We met at the airport there, and we flew directly to Lima, Peru. However, we didn't stay in Lima. Lima was just the stop before our final destination, which was Cusco. I'm sure some of you already predicted that, right? Cusco is the city that most tourists want to go to when they go to Peru because of Machu Picchu, right? It's close to that historical archaeological site. So we didn't get to see Lima. We just stayed in the airport there. And then we flew to Cusco. So when we got to Cusco, we actually didn't take a taxi from the airport to the main city because we thought, it's early and we have time to kill, so why don't we just walk from the airport to the city? It was, I think, 6 a.m., and we were going to stay in a hostel, and the hostel didn't let us check in until the afternoon. So we said, okay, we have no rush, so let's just walk to the city. So we ignored all the taxi drivers who wanted to take us there, and we walked for probably 45 minutes to the city. It was definitely an interesting experience. And when we got there, we couldn't go to our hostel, of course, because we couldn't check in. And so we decided to just explore the city a little bit and eat a meal and just relax a little bit because we had traveled a long way. And so we walked around the city and just sat around in the main square and relaxed a little bit. The city of Cusco is really nice. It's really cute, as we would call it. It's definitely a charming city. It's a place where you probably want to take some cool pictures on the different street corners and take pictures in the main square. And it's a nice city overall. It's definitely a touristic city because people arrive from all over the world to go to Machu Picchu. So you have many tourists in Cusco year-round, I think. We went in October, if I'm not mistaken, and that is not the busiest season. I think, actually, I don't remember when the busy season is, but October and November, I think, are the rainy months there. I could be wrong, but I think I remember that those months were considered rainy months in that part of Peru. So I think there weren't that many tourists. Of course, there were a lot. I think there are always a lot of tourists in Cusco, but I think that compared to other seasons, other months, there weren't that many. So it didn't feel too crowded. But yeah, we enjoyed walking around the city a little bit, and we did some people watching. In English, when we say the phrase people watching, we mean that you sit down on a bench or somewhere in public and you watch the people that walk by. You look at them, you observe them, and you just observe your surroundings. This is something that Americans do when they go to other countries, and I'm sure that people from all over the world do this same thing. But maybe in English, we use a different phrase than you. We say to people watch.